If I did what? Um.
Yes, and then we have Monica Yusuf.
Is,
Sent me a text, I see you.
oh, hi, Monica. So how many of you did the love languages quiz, just for reference purposes? Everyone? Rami, are you sure you did? Because you were a little hesitant. So you all know, do you all know in your head your top love languages? Okay.
So do we conference call? Asking if you are.
If you have a question, so you could call the church phone number.
Did you hear what we were saying about you? Do you
Yeah.
know what kind of?
Did
you hear what we were saying about you? Did you guys hear that?
You can have the details.
Call the church phone if you have questions. We'll put you on speaker.
Oh, I get it. So I'm using this mic. We're not talking about me using a different
If
mic.
they have a question, they can call the church phone and we'll put it on speaker.
I get it. Okay.
And then Basma is the only sound that's actually going to receive.
She's gonna call the church phone and she's
Oh, should I tell her that then? Wait. So if they have a question, they should call the church phone.
I call the church phone, yeah. Do they know the number? Abuna, what's the number?
51. I bet I know this. 457 58947. I've had that memorized for like 100 years. 455-8947. Okay, call in. Call in your questions. I feel like a game show host or something. So cool. Okay. Yes, it's all about communication. Okay. So do we start? Okay. And so, just so I know, Monica Yusuf, is she also watching? And Mariam and David. Okay. Is Lizzie there?
And Lizzie and Kareem.
And Kareem. Oh my gosh, hi guys, that's so fun. Okay, Lizzie, Kareem, everybody who I want to get to know better. Very good. Well, I'm sorry for the late start. My fault. So we have a lot to talk about because we're going to talk about communication and conflict and making life together more fun. And so, Gigi and I were talking during the planning about how we might end up like having an optional second session or something about this if there's more stuff people want to talk about. The trick with all this stuff is that many of you may be in a stage of your relationships where some of this isn't an issue. Some of you may have already encountered some of these issues, but a lot of these things come up as you go. And I could give you examples even from today in my own marriage that would reflect that. So there may be more things that kind of come up later. So I want to talk a little bit about what I'm hoping to cover is we're going to touch a little bit on the love languages, although we're going to probably hopefully expand on that in future sessions as well. Gigi and I have talked about that. But I want to just give you a little bit of a background on kind of a framework in which to understand or think about your committed relationships. And then we're going to do some stuff. You're going to actually be moving around a little bit, and those of you at home have to do it as well. So, all right. So a lot of times we fall in love, right? And then we have this beautiful picture on a beach. This is in Mazatlan. I was there 3 weeks ago, thinking about what love will be like. It's this beautiful scene, romantic, right? And even to get to this point, some of you have gone through some level of process, right? So can they see the screen too, or no?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So looking for a smart girl to start a relationship. Here's my number, and it's some really fancy equation. So some of you have known each other a long time. Other people are on a road for a long time. You follow sounds like this. You pray a lot. You hope for somebody. And then I love this little note. It's crazy because I don't even know when you became so important to me. Some of you have known each other a while, and then this just happened. It's like watching a snowstorm. You see the flakes falling, but you don't realize how they're adding up. Then your whole lawn is covered. All these little things have added up, and you're my snowstorm baby. And I thought, since it's March 29th, is it, and it's snowing still, that was appropriate. And then the human brain is really involved, and we're going to look a little bit at that as well. It's awesome. It functions 24 hours a day from the day you're born until it stops, and it only stops when you're taking an exam or when you fall in love. And so a lot of times the emotions take over, and so that's why things get a little bit complicated. It's something like this in reality. So you fall in love, and there's this honeymoon period, and for some people, that's not literally just when you're on a honeymoon. It's like a period of time, however long for you and your partner. And then there's reality, which is actually kind of like a barbed fence. So reality creates a few bumps. So the fall isn't actually all that smooth when you officially do land. But many people, and we have many role models in our lives, of people who make it a long time, right? And you need to really appreciate the person you're with. This is particularly important for John. If you marry a creative person, know that some days you'll come home to a spotless house. And some days dinner will be forgotten, the kids will be in PJs, and it will look like you were robbed. Find a way to appreciate both, because the second will happen much more often than the first. And you really do need to find ways to appreciate the little things about each other. Falling in love is easy. Staying in love is actually a little tricky. These two, though, found a way to do it. I love this. If lost, return to Rita, and then I am Rita. I don't know if they wear those everywhere they go, but so anyway, the science of falling in love, there's actually a whole science behind it if you want to study it. I'm not a neuroscientist, so I'm actually not going to get into this. I'm going to talk about the communication aspects of communicating once you're in love and maintaining that positive communication in your relationship. So I want to start by just giving you a real brief overview of a semester-long course, okay, in 2 minutes, of different ways of conceptualizing relationships, okay? So this is just an overview. I'm going to just flash up each model. The intent is not for you to understand each model deeply, but just to understand that there are these different philosophical ways of understanding how relationships happen, okay? So a lot of people talk about stages of a relationship and different stages you go to, stages of coming together, stages coming apart, relational maintenance. The one thing I want to point out about this particular stage model by Mark Knapp is that even once you're bonded, you've reached the highest level of meeting each other, falling in love, sharing emotions, all this stuff, making public commitments to one another before God and your people. There's at the same level as being completely bonded is the stage of differentiating, which means that both people still need to be who they are, maintain their authentic selves, and learn to appreciate each other. And it's very natural that you're not going to just stay like happy bonded all the time, that there are going to be bumps in the road, and that's part of it, and it's actually at the same level of being completely with your partner. So I actually don't like stage models much, so I don't mean to discount this, but I'm just going to skip over that. There's models about self-disclosure, how relationships grow through self-disclosure, which is a very communication-based model. Was that me? That was in my slide? That's hilarious, because okay. This is like 9 presentations put together, so that must have been. Maybe that's why I had this slide hidden, because I unhid it, and maybe I didn't even know that was there. That's hilarious. Okay. Anyway, there's cyclical models about how relationships go through cycles, and cycles of being resynthesized, and then cycles of kind of coming apart. But the one I'm going to talk about, which I think is most useful, and actually that I think is most universally applicable and most culturally universal, is dialectics. And we're going to talk about this, and then I want you to think a little bit about your relationships as we do, and I want you to think about some strategies, if you've encountered any of these tensions already that you can identify, some strategies that might be part of how you've handled things. So dialectics is a theory about, it's an approach to relationships where the idea is that in every relationship, so this is not even just marital relationships, this is friendships, this is all interpersonal important relationships in your life. There's this idea that we're constantly balancing some core tensions, that there are some tensions that are always there, and for the most part we don't notice them because they're balanced. And so, there's a certain range at which you're comfortable, and so you don't notice it. But when things become imbalanced is when things really come to light. And so I want to talk a little bit about this theory because it happens to be my favorite theory of interpersonal communication. It's also one that I think doesn't kind of preclude any of the other theories. It can kind of work with all the others as well. So when we're talking about dialectical theory, we're talking about sets of tensions that always exist. And there's internal and external dialectics. And so I want you to think for a minute, and especially being part of our lovely Coptic Egyptian community, this is going to be very poignant for you. So your relationship is about you and your partner, right? And that's the internal part of your relationship. And you balance tensions all the time in that individual relationship. But your relationship is also about you and your partner as a social unit and all the other people who are important in your life, right? So your family, your siblings, the church, your community. And those are the external dialectics that you and your partner together have to figure out a way to balance your relationship as a public event around everybody else as well, right? And so there's constantly these tensions, and there's sets of dialectical tensions that come into play on on every level as you're talking about internally and also externally between the partnership as a social unit and those outside. And so we're going to focus a little bit today on the internal dialectics, but I want you to think about when you have experienced some of this and how that might have affected you. So probably I'm going to just talk about three main sets of tensions. So probably the fundamental dialectical tension, I think, that affects people is the notion of connection autonomy. So if you think of a continuum, this has to do with how much as two individuals in a relationship you want to be connected, you want to make shared decisions, you check in with each other before you eat your lunch, just everything. How much you're connected and how much you're autonomous. How much you want to make independent decisions, how much you're just kind of going on your own, how much you know about the other person's life on a day-to-day basis. So that's a tension of connection autonomy. And that tension really comes into play. First of all, there might be some gender factors here that we're going to actually talk about gender because it's such a significant part of conflict in relationships. But there might be some things about connection and autonomy that are really affected by life situation, right? So somebody's applying to graduate school, and the other partner is just willing to go along with wherever that person gets placed for residency, for example. And that, let's say that you move to another city, and so now you and your partner have moved to another city, and you are the person who is going into graduate school, and you have all kinds of new stuff happening, a whole new social circle, all kinds of people you want to get to know, all kinds of networking opportunities. Some may or may not include your partner, and your partner is there new in the city as well, trying to kind of make a new life for him or herself, but maybe seeking a lot more connection with you in your relationship at that time because you've kind of gone off, you've met all these new people, but your partner isn't having that same shared experience. So a lot of different life things, moving, professional school, just having a baby, one person staying home, somebody getting laid off, somebody's family members needing medical care. I mean, all kinds of things can really come into play in this tension. In general, many of us have kind of a place on this long continuum where we're comfortable. And the thing about dialectics, if you imagine this being a continuum of connection and autonomy in this case, it's not that like Basma's over here closer to the connection end and John's over there, and so we count 12 steps until we meet in the middle. It's never about meeting in the middle. Sometimes it is, but it's not always the default thing that you just come till you both meet up, because then nobody's happy, right? If I had to give up all this new connection I'm making and you have no social life of your own, so you just tag along with me, I mean, it's not going to work, right? So it's not really about meeting in the middle. It's about figuring out strategies to balance this tension. And we're going to talk about some of those strategies in a few minutes, okay? Another one of the tensions is openness, closeness. And this has to do with how much you specifically share and are open about in your relationship. And there's definitely a gender stereotype here, right? Who shares more, men or women? Women, okay. How many men in the room? There's 3 right now. Those who are here virtually can raise your hands too. 2 men plus a Boona. I guess we have a special category, right? But you're in a marriage, so you have a lot of wisdom to share, right? So has anyone felt overwhelmed by how much the partner has shared? Like, do you really have to share all this with me? Has that happened to you too yet? I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay. You seeing this? It's okay. I know. Don't worry, you'll have your chance, Nadine. Okay. So, and we're gonna watch a video clip that's gonna highlight some of these differences of what kind of brings men and women to some of these differences. But definitely, and it's not true of everybody. There's definitely gender stereotype around this and a gender tendency based on some pretty solid gender research. But it's not necessarily the case that women share way more and men don't share at all. But this is the heart of a lot of conflict in relationships. My guess is if I gave you 3 minutes, you could all think, maybe with the exception of Pierre, of a time when your parents have gotten into some kind of argument around this issue of like the mother in the family feeling like the father's not talking enough and the father feeling the mother talks too much. That's probably something you've observed, okay? The third one is predictability, novelty. And this one doesn't sound that important, but as I've done some research and as I've even just anecdotally observed my students, college-age students, graduate students, I think I think this is at the heart of a lot of reason that a lot of young adult relationships don't survive, don't actually get to the stage of marriage. People just get comfortable with each other, and the relationship gets stagnant. And unless you continue to emotionally and intellectually grow with one another, you're just going to be going through the motions. And you might have a marriage certificate or a commitment to one another, wear a ring, but you're actually not growing your relationship. So this really has to do with how much people are comfortable with newness and spontaneity, and how much people want structure and routine in their life. Now, if John was here, he almost came with me. Some last minute plans today. But if he was here, he would give you lots of examples of how my total comfort on the extreme end of this scale, just going with the flow, traveling across the ocean without making hotel reservations for our first night, and just showing up in a foreign country, here we are. I don't know if I just always know it's going to work out. And so my sense of let's just go with it. I'm totally comfortable with uncertainty and spontaneity. And John is too, except that because I'm so extreme, it pushes him that way, right? It makes him want to have all of our travel plans done a month in advance is huge for us. For example, we have sent in an RSVP that we are going to a wedding in 2 weeks in New Hampshire, and we don't have flights yet. And I'm like, we don't have flights. We better maybe look for flights, right? John has looked for flights like 3 times already, and I think he's just waiting for me to say okay, but I don't feel like he's given me the final option yet. So I'm like, well, are we going to make flight reservations? Poor John. He deals with a lot. But anyway, he's really quite comfortable with uncertainty, but because of our relationship, he has become a lot more structured and planful and all that stuff. So definitely that's one reason I really like this dialectical theory is because it shows, I encourage you to think about these dimensions in your partnership relationship, and I encourage you to think about them with another close partner, like your sister or a good friend or somebody else. Think about how this plays out in a relationship as well, with a different person. And definitely the two in the relationship influence each other. And that's one of the kind of philosophical debates about dialectics that people talk about are where exactly is the dialectical tension? This is extremely abstract now, but is it that I, Basma Shagri Ibrahim DeVries, come to this at this point on this continuum and this is my general tendency, or is it that in my relationship with John, it's co-created in this magical space between us that kind of causes me to be here and him to be there and us to kind of, deal with that. There's kind of debate about how it actually happens, but the idea is the same, that you balance the tensions and both people come together and try to work that out. Now, there's a lot of different ways to kind of manage the dialectics in a relationship, and because this is really key when you notice that something is out of balance, okay? So one is temporal selection, which is where you just decide that you're going to focus on connection, the one end of the connection autonomy dimension, and you as a couple are going to decide, you're going to have a discussion maybe about that and talk about, well, here's what makes me feel connected to you, and here's the different ways that I want to be connected. And when we talk about, I didn't put a slide up on this, I have way too much stuff to talk about. But when we talk about intimacy, there's multiple dimensions of intimacy, right? So there's physical intimacy, of course. There's emotional intimacy, which is very important. There's shared activity intimacy, the idea that you and your partner have some things in common that you like to do. And I like to give the example, when we think about how many of your relationships are intimate, lots of your relationships really are intimate if you don't apply it in a marriage sense, right? In a sort of physical connection sense. If you think of intimacy in a broader scale, I think about my friend's grandpa who got together every Saturday with his friend George to play golf. They had a standing golf date for 45 years. And then George decided to move to Florida. And my friend's grandpa was so, I still remember that, this is years ago, but he was so depressed for a while because they didn't talk about their family. They didn't really talk much. They didn't share much. They certainly didn't share physical intimacy or really not much emotional intimacy. But they had a standing golf date every Saturday, and they had a connection around that. And so intimacy functions in really interesting ways. Anyway, so it's about deciding that we're going to focus on the connection part of it, and to think about the different ways that we might feel connected. One other dimension of intimacy is intellectual intimacy, that you feel like you have something you can talk about. I know that when John and I first met, and I was like, oh, it seems like God kind of brought him to me, and we were starting to get to know each other and stuff. I remember sitting around with some friends, and we were all in grad school, we were all talking about, like, what's like the key criteria, right? And then some people are like, well, you'll know it's the right person if this, or you'll know this. And so everybody's kind of giving their view, and the first things that came out of my mouth were, well, I think my criteria is, if I can, first of all, I have to feel in my heart that this is God's will, right? But if I feel like I can wake up every day to this person for 40, 50, however many years, every single day, and still have something new to talk about, still like be able to engage with one another, that's going to keep my relationship alive. And so you can't minimize things like intellectual intimacy and how important it is to connect on those levels. Another way of dealing with dialectical tensions is topical segmentation. This is where you might decide that, okay, so in terms of our extended family, let's deal with this, but then if it comes to politics and how we're going to vote, let's not, whatever. So you actually decide that you're going to deal with certain tension, you're going to compartmentalize a little bit, and you're going to deal with certain tensions on certain topics that are important to you, but not on others. And that's one way to kind of manage, especially, we don't have time today to get into like the extended family stuff, but whoa, that's a whole big deal. Neutralization is another way, which is compromise, figuring out a way that both people can be partially satisfied, or reframing, just figuring out that, this, like, let's take my original example of you move away for grad school for one partner, right? And the other one is feeling alone and really not connecting to people and really wants a partner to be home more and not keep going to social things in their department and all that stuff. That person might be able to refocus, find some other interests, and really realize, this is really short term. This is probably just going to happen for the first year that we're living in this city, and this is really important for my partner, and I love my partner, and I'm going to find other ways to have this need met for myself. I'm going to find other ways to fill the void of connection. It won't be exactly like your partner connecting with you, but I'm going to find other ways to do that so that I'm not always nagging my partner about this. So that's the reframing. Okay? A few basic things about dialectics. Change is constant, and that's partly why I love this theory, that these tensions are always there. You never eliminate them, but you're always trying to find a way to balance them. Okay? Now I want to just pause for a minute and have you think about, see if anybody has an example that you might be able to apply to this theory, anything that's popped into your head, and then we're going to move on, and I'm going to have you do something in a minute. But can anyone think of an example? And those on the phone too, or virtually out there, you're welcome to call in. That's right. Call the church. Yeah. Or calling anyone's cell phone, really, right? We could put them on speaker. Yeah, you could call a cell phone too. Does anyone think of or have questions about dialectics? I can put up the thing again.
So that when we find the right time,
Yep.
we could probably, if you don't mind, send that PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
I can't see the screen, I think.
They can't see it?
Not as far as maybe the words, maybe they can't see them or something.
Oh, okay. Okay. If there's a way for me to make it easier for them to see it, let me know. Oh, that's so funny. I'm doing it on here. I'm putting the number. I'm like, why isn't it changing up there? But it's because I'm not actually using my computer for this, am I? That's hilarious. Okay. We'll go on. That was military. Yeah.
Example, I think with the openness and, what is it?
Closeness. Yeah. Do you want me? I can go back to it. Yeah.
I think if people are on the opposite ends,
Uh-huh.
or maybe not close together, I think you get a mentioned by, not understanding, like, it's easy to take it personally, for example, if, like, you say you can sense an imbalance or tension,
Mm-hmm.
but if one person is, like, closed, it's hard for you to interpret it as, like, something that's okay, that's, like, going on with your relationship versus them.
Versus something
versus
else.
something else.
Absolutely.
So it's hard to, regardless of if you understand that they're closed and you're open,
Yep.
you still need them to, like, be open. But they want you to be closed,
Right. And the other thing, too, I'm not sure how much time we'll have to get into this tonight, because I also wanted to talk about communication styles. And one of the things with that is that it's not necessarily the case that the way that you prefer to communicate certain information is the way that you also prefer to receive it, right? So, I mean, think about this in conflict. Like if someone close to you had a conflict with you, think about how you'd want that to be communicated to you. But then how many of you are comfortable, and for how many of you is that your first natural instinct when you have a conflict with someone else and want to communicate that to someone, right? So a lot of us would say, just come to me, just come talk to me and be upfront. I just want to know if you have a conflict with me, right? Other people might say, just let it go. I don't want to deal with it. Other people would say, let's schedule a time and set aside so I'm emotionally prepared or whatever, right? But most of us feel that face-to-face would be the way to deal with that, right? When you have a conflict with someone, a lot of times it's tempting to, can I just text it? Or can we just, can I just ignore it? It might go away. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that you might kind of react to that. So it's not necessarily about the way you want to give and receive, right? So I just want to point that out. You're right that a certain amount of openness is needed in a relationship, right? If something is affecting the relationship. And it's responsibility of both people to realize that both people are not, in any relationship, both people are not equally comfortable with openness, right? So what does that mean the responsibility is of the person who is more naturally open and who's comfortable with openness? What is it so like this side of the room, I guess we're talking about, right? If we're going by the gender divide, right? What are some ways that what are some of your responsibilities and strategies you can use to help somebody who, just imagine, is not really that comfortable sharing emotions? What can help that person do that? I guess that's a question and a rhetorical question. So who's got ideas? Should I throw a couple out there and then you can throw? Okay. So I know that, for example, that, and I feel like we should watch our video thing now because it really relates to this, but females are often able to access information and emotion more quickly. And a lot of males that I know well, I feel bad using John. I know, it's obvious, but using John so often, but multiple males that I know really need time to think about something, and that's why they're not responding right away, right? And so there's multiple ways as a partner you can allow that person to have that time and space so that they're ready to talk about it, right? So you can say, hey, I know we're having this issue, and we really have to talk about it, but I know that you probably need time to think about it, and so Tuesday, can we talk about it, like at dinner, or writing down, here are some things that I'm thinking about related to this. Would you mind taking a few notes too about things that you're thinking about related to this? Multiple ways that you might be able to kind of help that person be comfortable, because you're right. I mean, you can't just always err. I mean, there are people who both people are more comfortable with being closed, and their relationships just go on like that. I mean, they almost live independent lives, and they're actually. I had it in here, I took it out, it was just too much information, but there actually are multiple theories of like types of couples, and that is one type of couple. It's called separate, and it's couples who are married, and they have, there was a connection, but they almost live separately under one roof. I mean, that's how their lives are, and it works. And I heard a speaker once talking about this a little bit, well, not that theory specifically, but she was talking about soulmates and earthmates, and it totally like opened my eyes to something. So she was saying, a lot of people, and this is of course affected by God's role in all this and how God brings us together. But when you think about like how our culture talks about soulmates, right, and falling in love, like this, you find somebody and there's this deep connection and you like sort of are blindsided by it and you have this connection that's beyond anything you can describe in words, right? And that's amazing, and it's so cool when that happens, right? A lot of people, some people find their soulmate and marry their soulmate. This person was contending. A lot of people find their earthmate, somebody they believe God intended for them, that they can get along with on this earth, that they can agree on many things with, they can raise children with, the dishes get done, whatever. They may not have as deeply emotional a connection as they as if they were true soulmates, if we think about that. But and I'm sure there's a lot of theology around this whole thing too. I do think, though, it's interesting. All of you have grown up in this country, and your parents have grown up mostly in Egypt, and there's obviously different conceptualizations around finding a partner and how it happens. And all of us have had more freedom than our parents had in terms of meeting who we might end up with, and I think some of that plays into it too. Your expectations around what it's supposed to be like can play into that too. Did you have an idea earlier, Nadine, about the making it easier for a closed person to be more open?
I was going to say I don't think like asking over and over and over again is helpful. I think
Yes.
it can have the opposite effect,
Mm-hmm.
even though you think you're helping them. Like if you ask it in different ways,
Right.
in different tones.
I think it's also really important to listen. I think people who are more open tend not sometimes to struggle a little bit with that. Like,
Yeah.
I know I'm definitely the more open of the two of us.
Oh, there's another mic.
But I think,
The-
Because then you're gonna have to repeat.
Oh yeah, Abuna had a mic out here, and then Mina put it away when we decided. There's a cordless one though. Mina put it like back on this side, Pierre, I think. Do you see it? Yeah. Sorry, I forgot that would be. Gigi has a brilliant thought. Everybody, she's gonna reshare.
Hold it. Hold it.
Testing. Is that working?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I was just going to say, I think for that open, a little closer. Is
There-
that better?
oh, that's
okay.
better.
All right. So I think it's really important also for the person who is more open to also be a good listener. And I think sometimes that's a struggle for the open person to do that. And when you're in a relationship where you get so used to being the talker and the other person doesn't, then sometimes the reason that person isn't opening up is because you're talking so much that you're not actually giving them the opportunity to share their emotion. And so I sometimes really have to remind myself to just stop and be a better listener. And oftentimes when I do that, then it really helps draw out what I'm trying to get from my husband.
So it's almost like Gigi knew this slide was coming up next. It says most people do not listen with the intent to understand; they listen with the intent to reply. And listening is one of the key skills. So I want to talk about listening for a minute. Anybody else have thoughts before we go on? Okay. And Nadine, I wanted to just mention what you're getting at already. Like, there's like a whole bunch of things in my head about that. There's a lot of communication style strategies that we'll need more time to talk about. But I have some stuff that I can give you guys and that we can talk about, because I think it'd be really useful to take an example like that and brainstorm around it. Because it's not about changing the other person, it's about leveraging those differences, right? And you can go years not realizing that something is setting your partner off. I mean, a simple little thing. I've given you guys the example before about the tone, right? Do you remember? I talked about the tone I have that makes John feel patronized. Have I ever told you this? So I was working on my research on communication styles, right? And there's this checklist of all these different nonverbal behaviors, all these different things. And for a long time in our relationship, I somehow, like you all know John, very sweet, kind, easygoing guy, right? But every once in a while, something I would do would upset him and kind of set him off, and he would either withdraw or kind of snap back at me. And he, so one time that happened. I was like, what? What did I do? We're just talking. And he said, it's your tone, Basma. And I'm like, what tone? He's like, the tone. It's the tone. And I'm like, what's the tone? And he's like, you know your tone. And for him, like all these years, he had labeled it like Basma's tone, like this with a big, black blotch on it. Like this is like what sets him off. And he assumed I knew and that I was he assumed that when I got upset, like I was sort of intentionally or subconsciously like using this tone. I'm like, honey, I don't even know what we're talking about. It's like, how can you not know? Like this had been part of his lived experience for God knows how many years, right? And I said, well, help me hear the tone then. He said, it's your voice. You make me feel this big. You make me feel like I don't know what I'm doing, like you don't think I'm competent. I was dumbfounded. I thought that's the last, I wouldn't have married an incompetent guy, right? And so I was like, what do you mean, honey? And he's like, that tone. And I literally couldn't hear it. I had no idea. So we actually made it a game. I was like, okay, for the next month or two, I want you to tell me every time you start to hear that tone. So he'd be like, the tone. And I'd be like, oh. And finally, it took me like 2 or 3 months, and I heard it. I could hear that something happened with my voice. I can't even describe it in words. Something happened in my voice that I understood he connected to the experience of feeling patronized. So then it was like, okay, now we've identified. So then every time it came up, then we'd stop, and then I would shift, and I was willing to do this. This is also part of it, is you don't have to change, but I wanted to not make our lives, I want to make them happier, So anyway, so we started identifying this tone. Well, anyway, and then now I don't use the tone anymore. Really, well, okay, if John was here, he would say once in a while the tone comes out, right? But I try not to use the tone because I can hear it and I can stop myself. Like I actually train myself. And it's something so natural. You see how fast I talk, right? It would just happen when we're talking. So anyway, so I have to tell you this because it was funny. So I was giving a talk last year to the, state of Minnesota employees, like some training for them. And this woman came up, and I'd given that example because I was doing this little activity with them. So I'd given the example of the tone. Well, this woman comes up to me afterwards, and she's like, oh, I have to share this experience with you, and I want you to share it with your students every chance you get because it's so fun. So anyway, so she's probably in her 60s. She said, I've been with my husband like 30 years, and she said, it's so, we have this thing that's so frustrating. It had been so frustrating for so many years. She said, I'd be in the kitchen, I'm like cooking dinner, and he's out there, and he's watching TV, and we would be talking about our day or whatever, and then I'd ask him a question, about his preferences for dinner or something else, and he would never answer. He just doesn't answer when I ask questions, and it's only like when I'm not in the room, like when I'm in the kitchen or, whatever. I'm like, it's interesting. She said, yeah. She said, and then he went for some medical testing for something else, and then they referred him to an audiologist, and then he went to the audiologist, and then the audiologist, the clinic called him and said, sir, we have the results of some tests we did. We'd like you to come back for a follow-up, and we'd like you to bring your wife with you. Could you bring your wife? And that's like the kiss of death, right? You never want to be told from medical clinic, bring a loved one with you, because that means it's bad news, right? So anyway, so his wife, they're all panicked, like he's going to lose his hearing, something horrible is going on. So anyway, so the doctor talks to him, shows him some test results, and then he said, I want to call you. So he called the husband in the room, let's just confirm the test, whatever. And then he said, if you don't mind, I'd like to just meet with your wife for a minute. And he brought her to the back room and tested her. The human ear has the ability to hear a whole range of pitch, right? So our voices are turned certain ways, and dogs can hear a lot more than humans, right? You know this, right? Way beyond whatever. It turns out that when the wife asked a question, how your voice inflects when you ask a question? It goes up just far enough that those two notes, in his whole range of pitch, he's physiologically unable to hear. Just those two notes. Like his hearing range was up to here. Here's the two notes he can't hear. And then he can hear this. Like literally he could hear everything except when his wife asked him a question. And if she's in the room, he can see she's asking a question. But when they're not together, isn't that hilarious? I'm like, what a good excuse. Like that would be a great marital strategy. Like, honey, I'm sorry, I just can't hear you when you're mad. Your voice gets too loud. But anyway, so let's talk for a minute about listening. What makes listening difficult? And I'm gonna jump back in a minute to get to some other stuff. But what makes listening challenging for you? First of all, how many of you think you're good listeners? How many think you're a pretty good listener? Okay. All right. I want you to think then about some of the strategies that make you a good listener. Okay. Okay. So Gigi, I think you were the one that was saying a lot of us just keep talking or we're thinking about what we're going to say. And that's very, very common, that a lot of us are not as good a listeners as we think we are.
If you're having a disagreement, oftentimes I think if your goal is to resolve the problem rather than like win the fight,
Yep.
then I think you're more likely to listen, and actually hear what that person has to say, because that's really how you're going to work towards a resolution, I
Yep.
think, in your conflict. So
Yep. And it's so hard to do that. And we know that in human behavior, whenever as the stress level increases, we revert to what's most familiar and most comfortable, right? Which is just getting my side out or whatever our style or strategy is. And so it completely compromises our ability to listen with positive intent and all that stuff. Absolutely.
I think it's hard because your partner might say something and then you have a flood of like thoughts that you want to get out.
Right.
And you get so impatient that you don't let them finish and you want to make sure that you're saying what you want to say.
Right.
And then it really is bad.
And because you're so invested in it, we're gonna have to talk about this more, because I mean, like in terms of planning future sessions. No, I mean, no, because I wanna get I'm coming up with even more. No, not you, not Gigi. No, because I'm thinking of other things we could do with this group that would be really fun around this. But okay, what makes listening difficult when it's difficult? What are some reasons listening is challenging? Just throw them out there. Pass the mic. They're wrong. The other person's wrong. Okay, you're right. So why listen? Absolutely. You feel attacked, so you're defensive. Okay? Okay. What else makes listening difficult? They need more time to think, right? They're listening. Oh, listen to this. They're listening. So, okay. Whole bunch of barriers to things, right? One is it just might not be as important to you as it is to someone else, or maybe more important to you, right? So the level of importance of the topic is something. A lot of times you focus on details so you can attack rather than actually listening for the main ideas. All kinds of interference, right? You had a horrible day at work. Something's going on. You're worried about your grandma who's ill, whatever. There could be a whole bunch of stuff that is in your head that's not really even about what's happening now, right? You want to be right, so you often use your energy to criticize. We have created a culture of fake listeners, and the digital. I am of all my concerns as a communication researcher. This is one of the tops of the list. Is what have we done to our children? Lucas is 8 months old, and last night in bed he was. I couldn't even believe this. So he has lots of colorful, fun toys. I mean, you can imagine he's a spoiled child, right? He has every possible thing that makes noise, that plays, that he could do. I'm right there feeding him. He loves me. We're in a soft, cushy bed. The only thing he wanted was my phone, which was next to me. And he threw every toy. He was like, he was screaming at me. He was trying to reach my phone, because once in a while, when we're like on long airplane rides or whatever, I let him watch little, Fisher Price, whatever, on my phone. He's 8 months old, and already his brain is wired to know this is something special and something different than my toys. And I am so scared about that, because we have created a culture where we are so immediate, so engrossed in our devices, so much not accustomed to connecting face to face, that we're comfortable fake listening. I shouldn't say this because I shouldn't, but yesterday I was having dinner even with my mom and John, and Mona's family's out of town, but we have Amy for the weekend. And my mom took a picture of Amy, and she wanted to text it to Mona. And, my mom is not the fastest texter on the planet, so we were probably a third done with eating dinner by the time my mom... I'm like, Mom, Jacob's going to need to go to bed. Put your phone down. But this is our culture, right? That we just... Of course, she had very, very good intentions. She wanted to let Mona know what was going on. But she totally tuned us all out so she could send the picture of Mona's daughter so Mona wouldn't worry about it. I mean, it was all good intention, but also it's part of this whole culture we've created where it's okay to text pictures at the dinner table, right? Which, oh my gosh, did I do that? Uh-oh. Okay. I bet I did. Okay, sorry, everybody. Thank you. All right. So anyway, the other idea is this idea of rapid thought, okay? How many words per minute do you think the average native English speaking speaker adult speaks? Who knows how many words per minute? About 100. Good guess. Okay. So can you speak 100? You can speak faster? Okay. The average is somewhere between 100, 110, and 150. Okay. I'm on the high end. I speak fast. I speak about 140 words per minute on average. Okay. Just so you know. So that's the average speaker. How many words per minute can the average native English speaking U.S. adult fully comprehend in a conversation? 50? So half of what the person speaks? Okay. What do you think? 70, so a little more. Hi, Abuna. Hi. I'm fine, thank you. You too. Okay. So your guess, Nadine, what's your guess then?
I would hope like 7.
Okay. Okay. It's actually 300 words per minute. It's actually the reverse. It's a little counterintuitive. The average listener can fully comprehend if they're listening. If you're listening and you want to learn a little bit more about communication and you want to be here today and you want to hear about interpersonal communication theories like dialectics, for example, where we have autonomy, connection, we have things like predictability, novelty, openness, closeness, and then we're going to talk about listening, how listening is very difficult, and how there are a lot of things that get in the way as we're trying to listen, but we can still focus and we can still try to listen. We're going to move on to talk a little bit about conflict, and we're also going to talk a little bit about communication styles and how we might communicate. How many of you are fully following along and feel very confident that you're understanding everything I'm saying right now? Every one of you, right? I'm speaking at double my rate, right? And you could understand everything I'm saying, okay? So it's totally counterintuitive. The deal is that our brains don't like to just be stagnant, right? Well, sometimes they do. But what's happening is we fill that space. That's why we don't listen well. That's why we construct our own arguments while our partner is sharing their views, right? We fill our brain space with a lot of extra stuff that instead of actually focusing on listening. Think of how great a listener you could be knowing you have double the capacity as your partner has to speak it to you, to really comprehend and take in and really emotionally engage with what they're saying. I mean, we could all be just these awesome listeners, but it's just so natural to fill our brains with all this extra stuff, right? So what are some ways to become a better listener? First of all, be prepared to listen. That sounds so obvious and simplistic. How many of you ever been in a situation where you just weren't ready to listen? Somebody walks in the door or they call you up and they're just going to go on there, here's my day, whatever, right? Happens probably more than half the time that somebody's sharing something important with you that you're not actually in either a physical, emotional, or psychological space to listen. And so you need to figure out ways to do that. And you need to figure out ways as partners to be present for each other and to make each other known. And, you know, some of this stuff, it's like, I mean, some of it you can just have fun with it, like hanging a thing on the door. There's little ways, little things you can do. John, the first years of our marriage, this is funny because I think this happened, but John thinks it was just my joke, but I actually used it. So we had a point system on the fridge. So like John would do things, he'd earn points, and then and what's funny is I always controlled the points. Like every once in a while he'd go in there and like take points off my side or whatever, and I would like put them back when he wasn't looking, whatever. But so anyway, but it actually averted a lot of conflict because then we would just joke about our points, like, oh honey, you don't have enough points to like have me agree with you tonight, whatever. So anyway, it was kind of funny. And then, of course, whenever I did something really good for him, I got like a bazillion points, and, you know, it was totally disproportional. But anyway, it worked in my favor. Try to control for distractions. That's hard. Stop talking. That goes back to Gigi's point. Do not interrupt. I'd like you to know that as some of the research that's been done on culture influence, there's a lot of cultural factors that have led to you being slightly disadvantaged in this way, in that Arab and Middle Eastern communication style is very engaging, such that interruption is usually acceptable. And so we all have to really actually work harder because of everything we've been exposed to allows that it's acceptable to do that, but it's maybe not. Is it?
If you watch Arabic dish,
Yeah.
when they're arguing about something,
Oh, yes.
it's unbearable for me to watch.
Yeah.
They just yell at each other the entire time, and that's how it's normal.
That's what they do. And even when people aren't yelling, people like outsiders. I remember a time when I had students at my cousin's house, like for dinner, when we took students to Egypt, and we're in the taxi ride on the way back to the hotel. And then the students were like, "Okay, we couldn't wait to get in the taxi to ask you, what were your two cousins arguing about?" I'm like, "Which two? Sonia and Mona? What were they arguing about?" And I was like, so I'm like, "When did you notice them arguing?" We're going over the evening or whatever. And I was like, "Oh, you're talking about the wedding they went to last weekend." Like the other cousin's wedding, whatever. And they're like, "No, they were arguing at each other in Arabic because the whole night they were speaking English except when they were, having that argument." I'm like, "Oh no, they just got really excited." Like it was actually just how they are. They're like, my U.S. students couldn't believe it wasn't an argument. And it wasn't. It was just how engaged they looked to an outsider. So empathizing is important. Concentrating on what's being said, not on what you're going to say. React to the ideas that are expressed, not the actual person. This is so hard, and this was something that, we're going to talk about gender next, and then we're going to have to figure out how we're going to fit everything else in. But this is particularly challenging from our cultural context. Males have a lot of stuff on their shoulders, like they're supposed to take care of the family and supposed to be the breadwinner. And I know these are traditional roles, but still this pressure rests on men a lot to make sure that things are okay and to feel like that their family is doing well. And so any attack to male ears can feel like they're being attacked as a person, right? More so than a female who may see multiple factors. You're not actually intending to attack the person, but the person might feel attacked. So that's hard. Looking at the speaker, so that's simple, but important to think about. Yeah, no, please.
I was just going to say the other thing that I found to be helpful.
The other thing that I've found to be helpful, not just in my marriage, but in other relationships with listening, is also just kind of reiterating what you're hearing, like saying it back to them. I think is a really good way to actively listen and let them know that you're actually paying attention to what they're saying. And the other thing I was going to say, Basma, about what you were saying about just like the male half of the partnership feeling attacked. There's a really good book, maybe we can talk about it another time, called Love and Respect. If any of you haven't read it, I think it's a really good book, just kind of alluding to that. And I just, from having read it to prepare for this marriage prep course, it's really interesting, some of the things that I've learned just about how to talk to Jim and how to make him feel like I value all the sacrifices and everything that he does for our family. And I don't want to get too much off topic, but I think for anybody who hasn't read it, it's a phenomenal book that I think would help any either wife or husband in their relationship, and it's a really good book.
Thank you. Perfect.
What you hear a lot of times, I think I wonder to myself how many times the other person not miscommunicated, but misunderstood. And so always when you're repeating what you have heard and understood, it can, catch any miscommunication or any misunderstanding.
I think that happens a lot, and it can be a source of frustration and really big problems in the marital relationship. You think that they're meaning one thing and they're not. The same goes for saying, you did this to me or you did this. I think it's really important when you're actually even verbalizing how you're feeling. And I don't want to get too far off topic, to say, rather than saying you did this to me.
Oh, she should have the mic. Sorry.
Rather than saying you did this to me, saying, hey, when you did this, this is how it made me feel. I think it's really important, rather than being attacking and criticizing, but just knowing that oftentimes, there are times where I've, construed something that Jim did to me in one thing, and then when I say, hey, this really made me feel like this, he's like, oh my gosh, that's not what I intended at all. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think we're just so different, male and female, that oftentimes, little things can be misunderstood. So the reiterating definitely helps with that. I agree.
And that, Abuna is saying the approach is very important. That simple strategy is so useful. I would suggest that you make a conscious effort to only start a sentence with your partner if you're complimenting them. You look beautiful. You did a great job. There really aren't other reason. If there's any negativity at all, start with, I felt this way when you did this, or when you did this, I, put a preposition in front of it, because that is a very It's a simple strategy you can employ because you can just remember that. Don't start with you, because it immediately makes somebody feel defensive, and then it's a fight. It changes the nature of the communication. Yeah, for sure. Perfect. Okay. Couple other strategies: just be flexible and listen for the main ideas in order to, not the nitpicky little things, which is what, when you're trying to win, right? You want to get more points on your side and the other side. So it's about points, then it's about missing the big picture, right? Most of the time, arguments that we have with our partner, and this is, if I was controlling this, if it wasn't on the jump, so as a public speaking instructor, never ever do this. I hate it when people do this, but I'm going to backtrack because I don't have any other way to do it except running in that room, okay? Because I just have one other thing here I wanted to show you. But I totally lost my thought. Okay. Yeah, anyway, let's move on. This is Neil Donald Walsh has written the Conversations with God series, and I haven't read it all. I'm sure I don't agree with everything he says, but he does make a point here that is iterated by quite a few psychologists around how everything is based on either love or fear. And I think I don't even know if I agree with it, but I think about this concept every once in a while. If you think about times when you've been angry, and if you could with a partner, with someone important to you, if you could trace it back, it's often connected to a fear. It's often connected to fear of losing that person, fear of loss of dignity in front of other people, fear of whatever. And lots of positive things are often connected to love. And sometimes also things that come up. And so anyway, I just think it's interesting to think about, fear is the energy that contracts, that closes down, draws in, hides, hoards, or harms us. And this is just in terms of fear in a relationship. Love is the energy that expands, it opens us up, it allows us to feel and to heal. All right. So we're going to do one more thing, and then we are going to watch a quick little video. So I'm going to quickly talk about what I think some of the core communication competence skills are that you need to have in a good relationship. And as I'm doing this, I want you to rank yourself and your level of comfort with each of these skills. I want you to think about the skill you're most comfortable with in your relationship with your partner, that you feel good about, and the skill you have to improve the most, or that you want to work on improving the most, okay? If everybody had their partners here physically, and if we had a little more time, I would be having people guess each other's and stuff. We can do more with this later. But so message formation skills are literally about putting your thoughts and ideas and feelings into words. It's about being able to communicate in words what you want to say, putting a message together. How many of you have ever been at a loss for words? I know exactly what I want to say, but it's not in words. I don't really know how to tell you. That's message formation skills, okay? Conversational climate skills are skills about making the climate of wherever you are, sitting in the living room or the coffee shop or whatever with your partner, making it a safe space, making it emotionally comfortable. So some of you are gifted in this area, like in a group, for example. If things get tense or awkward or uncomfortable in a group, there's always that person that can kind of make everything okay, however, just through their style or whatever. That's conversational climate. So think about particularly challenging conversations you've had and your ability or your partner's ability to make it feel okay to share, make people feel validated for being able to be open. Listening for understanding, we already talked about listening, but truly listening to understand the other person. A lot of us think we're great listeners. A lot of us don't really know how to listen to truly understand. Empathic response skills are skills about being able to respond appropriately emotionally. So having a measure of compassion, having a way that is emotionally satisfying to the person that's sharing with you, a way that helps that person feel comfortable. And then disclosure skills are the actual act of disclosing the information. So message formation is being able to put your ideas and thoughts into words, and disclosure is actually knowing when, how, to what degree to share that information, right? Because we've all had experiences where if somebody had shared it in a slightly different way or waited till tonight after my big exam or whatever, it would have been received much better. So it's the skills around appropriate disclosure. Okay? So I want you all to think about these skills, and I want you to think now just about yourself, and I want you to pick out the skill area that you think you have the most skill in, and I want you to pick out the skill area that you think you need the most improvement on. Okay? So take a minute to think about that, and try to think about a specific example if you can, about either one of those, about something to improve or why it's so important for you to improve in that area, or an example of what strategies you use that make you feel like you have a good measure of skill in a particular area. Okay? Give you a second to think about it. Everybody have kind of a thought? Is it coming to you about what's... I'm going to, because we're a small group, I'm going to just have you pair up from it, not in your partners because they're somewhere. Those of you at home have to do this too, with each other, Mariam and David. Okay, talk to each other. So just pair up with someone next to you, and I want you to just share for a minute what skill area you think you're good at and why, like what you've done or what strategies you've used in that way, and which area you really want to improve on. Okay? And then I'm actually going to ask for a show of hands for top skills and skills to improve on, and we might do more with that in future sessions. So take a minute and share. That is a great question. So the question was if it's between the couple or in general. If your answers are different, then share both, because it's definitely some of us have general skill, but then your partner brings out certain things in you that allows you to have greater disclosure skills or whatever that you wouldn't otherwise have. Yeah. So that's being able to set the emotional tone of the conversation. So like if things are tense, you're able to kind of manage that tension, that people can feel comfortable in that space and not like wanting to flee or something. Okay, wrap up your thoughts. Let's just see, and Rami had a great question as we're going along about if it's within this particular relationship or if it's about your skills in general. And we certainly know that partly how you know this might be a good partner for you is they allow you to be sort of a higher and better person than you've been, right? Or that they bring out certain things in you. So, for example, I mean, I know that oftentimes people say they feel comfortable with someone. Oh, good. Do we have a question? Mariam. Excellent.
Hello? Mariam? Hi. 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 How are you?
Hi, Mariam. Do you want to share or do you have a question?
I'm just wondering, is there any way
Did you need me to go over the skills? Is she still there?
Mariam? Do you need Basma to go over the skills again?
No, we just want to see them closely.
Okay, I understand. You're visual people. Okay, I'll take a picture and.
Can they, is the
What are
screen
you
too
able
far
to
away? Is
see?
that the problem?
What are you able to see, Mariam?
I just,
Is it really far away?
we just can see people, but the screen is kind of like blurry. We don't actually see words on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Maybe what we could do is when we take our break.
Zoom in.
We forgot about break. Yeah.
We'll try to, we'll work on fixing that, but in the meantime, I will text you the picture of the screen.
Okay, is there any way that you can make, or we could do the slides and email?
I'll send it. Yeah.
We'll just email the whole PowerPoint.
To everybody. Yeah, I can send it to everybody.
Okay, okay, that sounds.
Oh, should I do it right? Am I online right now?
Okay.
You know, I'll tell you what, so actually, you know, we'll do an online meeting where you can actually share this with it right now.
Okay.
We'll set up, you guys have a break?
It's already 6:30. Did everybody know that? So we just have a little time before Ashaya. So
We should do like 3 communication sessions.
I think I want to do more in this, but so for now, Mariam, we're sending you the picture, and then I think we'll make it more accessible next time.
Tell her I'll email it that way. She can to the whole.
Okay, Gigi's going to email it to the whole group. So anybody that's online that wants to see that particular slide, but then we'll send you this presentation too for everybody. And actually, there's just a couple. The other slides are just funny that I'm going to show because we're not going to get to all the communication style part of it. So I just want to do a quick check-in. Are people okay? Are we in the right direction? Are people getting something out of this? Okay. We didn't take a break, and it's 6:30, and I have like 5 more hours of stuff to cover. So what should we do?
Say that again?
We didn't take a break yet, but it's 6:30, and there's more to cover. No. I just mean can we do just a quick stretch break if anyone needs to run, but not a long break? I hate to do that, but okay. Oh, and Gigi brought snacks even. Oh goodness. Okay. All right. So. Okay, we can hang out. Yeah. So let's just quickly, by show of hands, I want everyone just gonna have to come clean on this. So how many of you said that message formation skills were your top skill? Anybody have that? Message formation. Conversational climate. Listening for understanding. Okay. Empathic response. Disclosure skills. Okay. Now how about your lowest? Message formation skills. Interesting. Okay. Conversational climate. Wow. Listening for understanding. Empathic response. Okay. And disclosure. Okay. Very interesting. Could you think of ways that this kind of came out? What I want to do is I'd love to spend more time processing this a little and come up with specific strategies. I'm tempted to wait on that and let you guys think about it, and especially knowing now they didn't see it very clearly. Okay. Oh, excellent. Okay. Because I'd like to be able to, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a little homework. Okay? So I'll send this to everybody, and I want you to look at this list. I want you to have a conversation with your partner. Some of you, well, 2 of you got to see what your partner said, and those that are, Mariam and David maybe saw each other's. But I want you to guess what your partner's top skill and the skill they think they need most improvement on is from their own self-assessment, okay? And then I want you to have a conversation about it. And next time we come back, I want you to have a few examples of how you've tried to work together to come to greater understanding around these skills. Because my guess is, if you just put a little effort into it, you already have a lot of these strategies. You already, because you've been dealing with it, you already kind of know. We just need to identify those strategies. And I have a lot of ideas too. But does everyone get that? I'll write it up in an email too. Gigi and I'll write it up and send it to you. But so we're gonna come back to this. But I want you to just think about this and think about how you might be able to improve in this area. So are we doing a stretch break now, or Oh, I mean, I could fill hours, but I mean, I can.
I think we've kind of come to the point that we're probably going to have to add another session. Is that okay, Linda? A part 2 for communication, because she has a lot of information that we won't finish in 3 minutes.
Or it can be optional, or I could find a way to provide it, maybe even written or otherwise.
It's important to have it extra. It's very heavy.
Because I had intended to do more to, when I found out not all the couples were here too, and I wasn't sure about the connectivity, I wasn't planning to talk at you this time. I mean, I was planning to do a little more action too. So,
Let's plan on part 2.
okay.
So that you're not feeling like you have to rush through it. Because I think this information is so important that we need to do it justice and spend the institute time. Do you guys agree?
Okay.
So then, yeah, don't try to finish your whole thing in half an hour, because I think that's probably not realistic.
Yeah, okay. So do people want a break? It's 6:34. Do you want to take a few minutes, get some water? A few minutes before 7 anyway. So do people want to, does anyone need a break? Really? You're like, are you sure? Okay. Okay. Abuna said go, so we're going to go. Okay. And this is so obvious, but most of us don't ever think about this when we're in an argument or when we're judging somebody. Not everyone thinks the way you think, knows the things you know, believes the things you believe, or acts the way you would act. Remember this, and you'll go a long way in getting along with people. And this is true even with the person you're closest to in your life, even with the person that that you're engaged to or are married to. And so it's important to kind of keep that in mind. Okay, we already did listening. I'm doing the thing I told you never to do, but I don't have control here. So, all right. So I want to talk a little bit about gender, okay? I saw this guy, I actually saw these T-shirts where did I see them? The Dallas airport or something. But so those T-shirts, I don't need Google, my wife knows everything. All right. And then 3 wise women would have asked directions, arrived on time, helped deliver the baby, brought practical gifts, cleaned the stable, made a casserole, and there would be peace on earth. So this is an interesting little thing about gender, just to get you think a little bit about gender differences, okay? And I love this. How mad is she? Best florist sign ever, okay? Is she 1 rose mad, or like half a dozen roses, or like the big bouquet? So there's a lot of ways to deal with problems that come up related to gender. So now I want to watch this short clip. He's actually, I think he's a former Lutheran pastor or something, now comedian. He goes around and does like marriage talks. His name is Mark Gungor or something. But this is actually based on real research about the brain. Okay, so I want you to just look at this for a minute. It's about men's brains and women's brain. And is there a way that the people virtually, they'll hear it? Okay.
Start discussing
Yep, you can play it.
men's brains, women's brains, and how they're very different from each other. Now, I want to start with men's brains. All right, now men's brains are very unique. Men's brains are made up of little boxes. And we have a box for everything. We've got a box for the car. We've got a box for the money. We've got a box for the job. We've got a box for you. We've got a box for the kids. We've got a box for your mother somewhere in the basement. We got boxes everywhere. And the rule is, the boxes don't touch. When a man discusses a particular subject, we go to that particular box, we pull that box out, we open the box, we discuss only what is in that box. All right? And then we close the box and put it away, being very, very careful not to touch any other boxes.
Now watch what he does here.
Now, women's brains are very, very different from men's brains. Women's brains are made up of a big ball of wire. And everything is connected to everything. The money's connected to the car's connected to your job, and your kids are connected to your mother, and everything's connected to everything. It's like... It's like the internet superhighway. And it's all driven by energy that we call emotion. It's one of the reasons why women tend to remember everything. Because if you take an event and you connect it to an emotion, it burns in your memory and you can remember it forever. The same thing happens for men. It just doesn't happen very often because, quite frankly, we don't care. Women tend to care about everything. And she just loves it. Okay? Now, men, we have a box in our brain that most women are not aware of. This particular box has nothing in it. It's true. In fact, we call it the nothing box. And of all the boxes a man has in his brain, the nothing box is our favorite box. If a man has a chance, he'll go to his nothing box every time. That's why a man can do something seemingly completely brain dead for hours on end. You know, like fishing.
Did you hear that, David? David fishes, right?
Now, they've actually measured this. The University of Pennsylvania a couple of years ago did a study and discovered that men have the ability to think about absolutely nothing and still breathe. You know, they connected all the wires and stuff like that, and watched their brain activity, and then all of a sudden, I think he's dead! Huh? Women can't do it. They can't do it. Their minds never stop. And they don't understand the nothing box. And it drives them crazy. Because nothing drives a woman more crazy or makes her feel more irritated than to witness a man doing nothing.
Okay. So has anyone seen that before? Okay. Very insightful though, right? Yeah, the link will be on here if you want to go back and watch it again. But you can't really talk, well, let me just preface this and say, you know, there's a lot of debate in the gender communication field about should we even be studying, you know, male-female communication, whatever. But I do think, you know, based on some pretty solid scientific stuff, even about how our brains are wired. And you know, one of the things that that they talk about in psychology is how women's brains have a much more sort of developed or refined. Is this true, George? What's it called? The connections, the connectivity between the two sides. Corpus callosum, yes. So, which is what allows the sort of going back and forth. And so that's sort of how women are able to live in what we might consider a man's world and take on kind of some of those roles as well. And so that's part of this piece of emotion that he's talking about. So anyway, I do think it's really useful because I think at the heart of a lot of marital issues is some things we just don't understand about gender. So we're going to talk about this just briefly today, and then we'll get into it more more a little bit later on. But so there's this dual culture theory of gender. And the idea is that even if you are a twin being raised in the same home, so let's take our dear Marcus and Martha, twins at our church who grew up, who I saw grow up here. And so they had, ate the same dinners every night, went to the same schools, had the same two older sisters, had the same influences, right? They're very, very different people. We all know that, right? But really, the theorists would say, who believe in this, would say they really grew up in two different cultural environments because the way their teachers talked to them, even the same teachers, talk to boys and girls differently. The way that they were dressed, the way that the society treated them was different based on being male or female, okay? And so this idea that we are very different and in that we even from our own siblings is true. Males in general are socialized to assert themselves, to assert independence, to compete, to win. There's a lot of pressure on men to come up with the answers to solve the problems. This is at the heart of a lot of marital issues. A wife will go to the husband and just want to talk about this thing that happened at work, and the husband will immediately come up with some ideas for solving the problem. And the wife's intention was simply to get it off her chest and have her husband say, honey, I support you, you're validated in your emotions, and I'm sorry that you have a difficult coworker. But not to say, well, why don't you go tomorrow armed with this idea, or, coming up with a solution. So there's definitely ways that males are socialized to come up with these solutions. Females are socialized to build community and solidarity. This is why females can be on the phone with each other for like 2 hours and 14 minutes with no goal, no specific question to ask each other, simply just to be on the phone and to talk, right? And males don't really get this because there's always supposed to be a goal or a question or a reason that you're calling. Even if you spend the half hour connecting and just checking in with each other, ultimately there's supposed to be something like let's solidify our plans for Saturday or let's get to some kind of decision or something concrete. When females are typically comfortable hanging up after just connecting, right? So this is an issue. And so I thought this might be useful from a communication perspective for you guys, right? So 5 deadly terms used by women. Fine. This is a word women use to end an argument when she knows she's right and you need to shut up. You need to be quiet. Nothing means something and you need to be worried. So nothing is the opposite of nothing. Go ahead. This is a dare, not permission. Do not do it. When she said, yeah, go ahead and do it. Whatever is a woman's way of saying, I'm not going to say it out loud, but that's okay. She's thinking long and hard on how and when you will pay for your mistake. And the bonus word is wow. This is not a compliment. She's amazed that one person could be so stupid, okay? So, wow, honey. Okay, so this is helpful for you to know, I think. And this, I think, if women ruled the world, there'd be no wars. Just a bunch of countries not talking to each other when they're mad at each other, okay? And here we go. There are 3 kinds of men. The one that learns by reading, the few who learn by observation, the rest of them have to pee on the electric fence for themselves to learn the lesson, okay? So a lot of things that we might do that. Marriage is a relationship in which one is always right and the other is the husband. You see these are biased because I'm a female presenter. Of course, I did look for male ones in support of males, and I haven't found many. So maybe I'm just in the wrong circles, I guess. You send me some, and I'll put those in. Okay. Did my thing go up? Oh, okay. Uh-oh, yeah. My thing is not working. Am I still on? Oh, I got a red light. Is that bad? Is the red light bad? You need to use the light. Thank you. We're almost done anyway. Thank you. All right. Can you hear me? Is this on? Okay. So just a few minutes left. One thing I want to talk about, is this working, the mic? Kind of? Okay. Okay. One thing I want to talk about is I want to just tell you a little bit about what's behind some of these gender differences, and then we'll talk about, I feel bad because I really want to get to more strategies, which we haven't completely gotten to yet, but some of this background stuff is important. Okay. So one of the things that is important to understand about the male-female development and communication is how men come to have to be the ones to have the answers and how women come to want to just connect with one another. And it's interesting. I don't know if anyone has seen any of the studies of preschool children, even done in the last few years. So this is, although things have really shifted in our society and gender roles, in many ways have equalized on multiple levels, there are still so many ways that we are very much socialized to be males or females and have very different ways of communicating as a result. And so one of the things that they've studied are preschool children when they have open playtime, when they're just given open choice to do whatever they want. And these are like 4-year-olds we're talking about. And even as recently as a few years ago, when they just film these children with just open instruction to just play however they want, it's very typical that the boys, will they want to be outside or inside if the weather's nice? Boys will want to go outside, and what will they typically be doing? Some kind of sport, okay? And they'll probably be playing a group game, like kickball or soccer or something, right? And what's the nature of those games? Okay, they're physical, so is there as much communication? Not as much communication, it's more about the physical activity. When do they communicate? Okay, they communicate when they're fighting, and the things they might fight about are 2 key things. One thing that's really clear about those games is there are very defined roles, right? So your first baseman, your second baseman, or your goalie, or whatever, depending what you're playing, right? And it's very specific, right? Anyone ever heard wait, you're shortstop. Why were you over here by second base? Like, that was my ball. Why did you, right? So there's very specific roles, and there's very specific responsibilities that go with each role, and there's clear rules to the game. And everyone knows the rules, right? So there's no need to discuss it, no need to talk about it. It's just what it is. When somebody makes a rule infraction or violates their role, that's when we talk about it, right? They'll stop and they'll argue, or they'll try to work it out, right? Or they'll do the big we won thing and get all right. But really, they're only talking when there's that infraction. They're not talking to build a relationship with each other. They're not talking to let's negotiate about the rules, unless there's a rule infraction or a different interpretation. They're only talking to work out and solve a problem, right? When girls play, what do you think they most, and this is, several studies has shown this, when they have a choice of what to play, what are some of the things the preschool girls choose to play? House or school, right? Or doctor, like clinic or whatever, right? So let's take house. They play house, right? So they are not in a group of 10 girls with everybody being first, second, third, or with an assigned role, right? When you play house, you can have any configuration. The daddy could be home, the mommy could be home, right? There could be a bratty baby brother. There could be any configuration, right? So even before they can play, first of all, they're in a small group of 3 to 4 girls. And girls are mean. They often will not let other girls into their little, right? We already have 4 people to play house, right? So you play house later. We're get to play with this stuff over here, right? And then they, first of all, before they can even play, they have to negotiate their roles, right? Well, I want to be the mommy, right? Well, you got to be the mommy yesterday. I want to be the mommy, right? And then they have to work out who gets to be the mommy. Okay, well, I'm going to be the mommy now, and then if we get to play again after lunch, then you can be the mommy. Okay. And is there one way to be the mommy? No. I mean, you could be the really sweet mommy that everybody loves and everyone goes up to and kisses when they see her. You could be the mean mommy, right? Everyone's afraid. I mean, there's 100 ways to be the mommy. Right? And so you get to choose, and you get to kind of enact that role and use more imagination, right? And so what does this mean for girls? What do they develop? So they know that they need to communicate even to move forward in play, right? So they're motivated to communicate, to build community. They're motivated to communicate, to interact with another. And so a lot of the outcomes that we learn from these games and from how we naturally are predisposed to these games, and of course this is all, I should just say, this is all generalized, of course, right? Not every boy's like this, not every girl's like this. There's some debate about this research, but it seems to be playing out pretty clear from what I've observed. So girls are taught to be collaborative and inclusive, at least as long as you're part of the group, right? They're not always inclusive of everyone. Don't criticize or outdo others. It's really about working together. Pay attention to others' feelings and needs. They often choose things that are nurturing or caretaking, because you can't move on if the baby's just going to be screaming, right? You got to respond to the baby so that you can play. Boys games, assert yourself, establish your leadership, focus on the outcomes, and be competitive. And so this has huge implications for how we are then, or how we develop into communicators and how we see our role as communicators. And so a few key differences that come up, and I think we might ending up with this today. And I apologize, this wasn't as much as I wanted to cover today. But what we end up with then is what actually counts as support. If you want to be a supportive partner, when you think about how we're really socialized so differently, there are very different things that count as support, right? For the guy, it might just be the public recognition, like high five, you made a goal, right? And for the girl, it might be telling her like 4 times the next day, I really had fun when you were the teacher when we played school, right? Or you were like the funnest teacher, right? Okay. It's also very tricky to give feedback across gender lines, right? Like, anybody ask you, like, how do I look in this dress? There's only one right answer. You know that, right? Like, you look great. No, you're supposed to be honest, because a girl will get mad if she goes out and doesn't actually look good in the dress, right? But it's very tricky to know how to do that, right, across gender lines. It's very different about how we talk about our relationship, okay? Guys get really nervous that girls talk about a lot of things that happen in their relationship with their partner, with their friends, and it's kind of a public thing. Males are not accustomed to talking about a lot of that stuff. And so that's something. And then also how we experience care. And this is where we were going to get into the love languages, which we're definitely going to continue. I think Gigi and I will talk about. I had some ideas to incorporate it today. Clearly, I talked too much and started late. So we'll get into that. But that relates to this as well. One thing I'll say about the 5 love languages is that when John and I took that quiz, his top 2, we'd been married, 8 years by when we took it. His top 2 were my bottom 2, my top 2 were his bottom. We didn't know that for 8 years. And we both have degrees in communication. And all of a sudden we're like, so all those little notes I leave in your suitcase when you travel, little notes on your pillow, like words of affirmation, which are really important to me, like that doesn't mean anything. He's like, no, of course, it's very sweet. And I'm like, no, but this is how I'm communicating my love to you. Like, this is a big deal. And he really wanted just more time with me. He wanted me to not have as many meetings and to like come home and spend more time, and it was, so I'm telling you that because we're 2 people that I think are somewhat in tune to our relationship, and still 8 years later, we're realizing we're not even communicating love in the way that the other person was experiencing it or feeling it to the degree that we could have. So anyway, so just a few closing slides. This is one little activity I've had my students do, is thinking back to your own gender socialization. So if you want to do this, you can. The other thing is more important homework, the competence skills. But if you want to do this, you can. I want you, whether you're male or female, to fill in the whole chart with at least 3 things in every box. So think of the toys that if you could choose to play with when you were a little girl or a little boy, what kinds of toys? So under examples, you'd write something like dolls or whatever, cars. The chores are the things you were expected to do in the house, how you were expected to help the family, and then the TV shows, if you, what kinds of things you would choose to watch, and then the messages that come through those things. And I think you might see some interesting ways that even for yourself, gender has been socialized. And maybe you're from a family where the boys and girls had the same responsibilities in the home. That's cool too. It's not like there's one right answer, but that's one way to do it. I love this. You let your son play with dolls? Oh my gosh, aren't you afraid he'll turn out to be, what, a dad? So isn't that cute? So all the fear, the social fear around you're going to let a boy play with a doll, right? This one we'll come back to later. Today, 2 families will become one. Please pick a seat, not a side. I think that's really sweet. Don't let worries kill you. Let the church help. So I really do mean that the church will help, not kill you, but the church will help you, right? But I thought that was a funny thing, right? And then I leave you with this final thought today. I had no idea till I found this slide. Did you know sea otters hold hands when they sleep so they don't drift away from each other? Isn't that sweet? I know. So anyway, be like a sea otter till we see, don't, when you have the opportunity to be together. All right. So we will definitely continue this. One last thing I have for you, and Gigi and I will meet and talk about how to do this, but I have a book with some resources on a lot more communication strategy. So as my gift to you, I have a book for each couple about communication, and it's not actually written for couples. It's not intended to be a couple workbook, but there's some things in here that tools we're going to use as we go and suggestions I'll give you as we go that might be useful. So I know you don't all live in the same place right now, but I didn't have enough to give one to everybody. So you're just going to have to share because eventually you'll be together and you just need one. So, all right. So Gigi and I will talk. Abuna, do you have anything to... Okay. Should we pray? Do we pray? Okay. Who does that? I mean, like, who would like to... I mean, we all pray, but who would like to say our closing prayer? I'm sorry. Abuna?
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Thank you, dear Heavenly Father, for everything that you give us. Thank you for your Holy Spirit inside each one of us that will guide us, will teach us, will put everything into practical life, and will put all the theories and the rules and everything, will put it into perspective and put it into the language of love, that we can know, first of all, how to love each other, and then we can know how to communicate, how we forget about ourselves and look at the other as not just a partner, but as a fulfilling of each of our lives. Lord, we ask you that you open our eyes and open our minds and hearts, that we can understand the importance of having you in the midst of each thing, knowing that you and you alone will bind us together. You and you alone will be the reason, as you said, that you are the vine and we are the branches. We are fixed in you and you are in us, and then we're all fixed in each other. Lord, teach us how to live that holy, heavenly, united life together, each one of us with bringing up a new church and bringing up a church in our homes that will be for the glory of your holy name. We ask you to bless each one here, bless all the couples, bless all the future marriages, that surround them with your angels, and protect each one, those who are in distress and those who need really guidance. We ask you that you stretch your hand and open the eyes, that we can see you first of all, then we can know and learn how to love each other. Bless those who aren't with us. Bless Basma for her time and efforts, through the intercession of all your saints, intercession of Saint Mary, through the prayers of Abuna, and hear us when we say all together, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come on earth. Give us this day, forgive us our trespasses. Lead us at temptation, but deliver us to thine. Go in peace.